In episode 15, we're about to meet the Shadowmaster in just a minute, but first of all, the story begins late at night on New Thundera. Now, the Shadowmaster who lives in the castle had just found out that there's a lunar eclipse. Oh, before we go any further, remember Claudius, who's Lionel's father from season 1, episode 20, just 3 seasons ago? Well, he's in this episode, but don't worry, we'll get to him later. But right now, here you see the Shadowmaster pleading his case to say he now has a chance to have only one thing on his mind: revenge. Before they could get underway, he pleaded himself a case. He had to escape from the Shadow Realm, which he was exiled, thanks to Claudius, who's Lionel's father, and Jaga the Wise, who's Lionel's mentor. You remember him. So, what he's going to do is that he's going to contact Mumm-ra's spirits of evil. And once that's happened, he can, however, return to Thundera. Or should I say, New Thundera. So what the Shadow Master did is that he sent his right-winged companion, the Shadow Bat, over to the Black Pyramid. So that's what it did. Tomb Chamber, after the Shadow Bat had landed into the cauldron, that's when the spirits of evil had asked the question, "Who appears before us?" "I did," the Shadow Master said, and he had introduced himself. So the Shadow Master continues to plead a case with the ancient spirits of evil to say, "Listen, I could do something for you that Mumm-ra couldn't. I can destroy the Thundercats." When Mumm-ra heard that insult from Shadow Master, he's not happy about it. He says, "What? How dare you?" And he was about to send the Shadow Master away in his cauldron, of course. And that's when the ancient spirits of evil told him, "Not so fast, Mumm-ra." That the Shadow Master continued to plead his case. After the Shadow Master thanked Mumm-ra's ancient spirits, that's when he continues to plead a case. Then flashback, he said that many years ago, before Thundera exploded, now remember we've learned that 3 seasons ago. He also explains further that he was once a Thunderian wizard once upon a time, and he has the Cloak of Darkness to prove it. And of course the Cloak of Darkness is very powerful. So, what the Shadowmaster said next was shocking. He said it was because of his arrogance that led to his downfall and his defeat, thanks to Claudius, who was Lionel's father, and of course Jaga, who was Lionel's mentor, both of them who were best friends at the time. According to the Shadowmaster, he was also defeated by the Sword of Omens that they once owned once upon a time. So, as punishment for the Shadowmaster's crimes, they sent him to exile, where he remained since, in the Shadow Realm, of course. Then, the Shadowmaster explains further that ever since his exile in the Shadow Realm, he built a castle of his own. That's what we saw in the beginning of the episode, waiting for his chance at revenge until his after revenge finally came when old Thundera exploded just like it did 3 seasons ago. But before it did that, now we also learned that 3 seasons ago, 7 of the Thundercats, including Jaga when he was alive, had boarded aboard a flagship to Third Earth. And Claudius, before that could happen, he tries to escape too, but then he was caught by surprise thanks to the Shadow Master. It was also at the time of the lunar eclipse, according to the Shadow Master, when he continues to plead a case. Once he gains enough power for him to escape from the exile, that's when he, as I said, catches Claudius by surprise, and then he throws him in the ice, where he remains to this very day. So back in the present, in the tomb chamber of the Black Pyramid on New Thundera, Mumm-ra is still all upset, so he says, "Enough of this! Just tell me, what favor do you want from us?" Then the Shadow Master said, "With your help, ancient spirits of evil, I can get rid of the Thundercats." "How are you going to do that?" the spirits asked. Well, the Shadow Master suggested that since Claudius has been frozen in ice thanks to him, he can use him as bait. So you're probably wondering why a Shadow Master is using Claudius, who's Lionel's father? Because he just pleaded the case that with Lionel in the Shadow Realm, then before you know it, that's when the Shadow Master realizes that with Lionel out of the way, the Thundercats will be, how you say, done away with. So even though Mumm-ra likes the Shadow Master's idea, but then he wanted to know from him, Why did he need help from them, meaning Mumm-ra's ancient spirits? Well, according to what the Shadowmaster said when he pleaded his case, he said that with their powers I could be set free from the Shadow Realm itself, he said. Mumm-ra's ancient spirits had agreed to help out the Shadowmaster. We decided to help you after we've heard your case, they said. And they said, if you succeed in your mission of getting rid of Lino, we'll enlist Mumm-ra to open a portal for you, they suggested. Go now, the spirit says, destroy them. And so the Shadowmaster was sent on his way. After the Shadowmaster left, that's when Mumm-ra sensed that something was off. He was petting his sidekick, Mumm-ra, and he pleaded his case to say that the Shadowmaster will be more troublesome than the Thundercats themselves. Meanwhile, the Shadowmaster had arrived at Cat's lair. One of the first things he did, he goes to Lionel's room and looked at Lionel through the window. The next thing he did was to go into Lionel's room. So he says, so, this must be Lionel. He can tell that by looking at him while Lionel was sleeping. Lionel was not aware of this yet. What the Shadowmaster said next was unbelievable. He says, now I'm going to show you what a nightmare looks like. So while Lionel was in deep sleep, Lionel dreamed that he was inside the castle of the Shadowmaster, and there he sees it, his own father, Claudius, encased in ice. Then the Shadowmaster appeared in front of Lionel, and he introduced himself. Then he said, your father Claudius is my prisoner right here in the Shadow Realm, he said. Lionel was in shock. He just couldn't believe what he heard. Then the Shellmaster said, wait, there's more. Claudius will remain my prisoner until you come to rescue him. Or else I'll destroy your father right here, right in front of your eyes, the Shellmaster said. So what the Shadowmaster did was unbelievable. He uses his power on Claudius encased in ice, and the next thing you know, they both exploded right in front of Lionel. When Lionel woke up in his room, he was back in a prison, and he had no idea what's going on. Now, he couldn't help but ask himself, is it really a dream? But then the spirit of Jugga appeared to him and says, no, I'm afraid it's no dream, he said. Then Jugga just let slip to Lionel to say that the Shadowmaster was a powerful Thunderian wizard once upon a time, until he was in exile a long time ago, he said. Then Jugga said, wait, that's not all, because he just confessed to Lionel that it was him and Claudius, who's Lionel's father, who had defeated him, and of course exiled him just before Thunder exploded, just like it did 3 seasons ago. Back with Lionel, who had just heard the news from Jugga, he's really confused, and then he asked the question, why is the Shadow Master here just now? Take a look out the window and see for yourself, Jugga said, and so Lionel did. And that's when, by surprise, he sees the lunar eclipse. Now remember, that's the same lunar eclipse that we saw in the beginning of the episode. Then what Jugga told him next was unbelievable. This lunar eclipse you just saw is what made the Shadow Master, however, make shadow images whenever he pleases, he said. And of course, according to Jugga, that explains why the Shadow Master broke free from the mystic void. And right here in this world just now, Jugga said. So, then it's Lionel's turn to plead his case. So let me get this straight. You mean to say that this lunar eclipse has been here ever since old Thundera exploded, and right here in New Thundera, and that explains why Claus has been captured just till now, he said? So you know what this means. That means Lionel has to go on his rescue mission to save his father. So after Lionel told his mentor Jaga that, he then asked the question, how do I get to the Shadow Realm? Very simple, Jaga said. Use your sword on the Book of Omens, he said. It'll take you straight there. And Jaga says, wait, there is a catch. The sword and the book must be together, he said. And should they be separated in any way, you'll be weak, he said. And the worst of it all, Jugga says, you'll be stuck in this shadow realm forever. And so after that, Jugga's spirit left. So Lionel knew that there was no time to lose, but before heading off and leaving his bedroom, he says, thanks for the tip, Jugga, but I'll have to take that chance. And so after that, he heads off. So meanwhile, in the sword chamber, we have Lionel talking to Panther and Snarf about the situation. And I guess it's confirmed that Lionel just told Panther what Jugga said about Lionel rescuing his father. So Panther went first to speak in this case after he heard the situation. He says, I know this sounds crazy, but I think they might be a trap somehow. So Snarf suggested to go along with Lionel, but Lionel refused. The reason why he refused is because he told Snarf, Lionel that is, that he has to go alone. Also, Lionel suggested for Snarf that someone has to stay and watch the sword and book while he's away, because they must remain together as Jugga said. So Panther said, that's a good idea. Panther also suggested that he should look around the lair a little to see if the Shadowmaster is still around somewhere, and so he heads off. Back with Lionel, he told his Sword of Omens and the Book of Omens all at once to take him to the Shadow Realm, so that's what the sword did. Of course, the Book of Omens didn't hesitate to take him there. Back with Snarf, he has never seen anything like it before, but he was the first to witness it. So after Lionel went into the Shadow Realm, just the way he's planned, he was worried and says, oh, Lionel, I just hope you know what you're doing in there. Snarf, however, has a reason to be concerned, and he has the right to be. And he says, oh, Lionel, if you don't know what you're doing in there, you'll be stuck in there for sure, and we'll lose you, he said. Meanwhile, at the Shadow Realm, there's Lionel, and he, good news, had made it. And just the way it's planned, he went to find his father. So after, long story short, Lionel went inside the Shadowmaster's castle. Back with Panther, he's in the castler's control room. At first, Panther thought that there was no sign of the Shadowmaster and that the control room was empty, or so he thought. That is until he spotted a pair of glowing red eyes in the screen. Then, what Panther saw next was unbelievable. The eyes inside of the screen of the control room begins to glow, and that's when, before you know it, he saw right before his eyes a shadow bat. And why not? Panther hates bats as well as he hates spiders. So a shadow bat comes out of nowhere and goes face to face with Panther himself. So, when the Shadow Master's face comes out of nowhere to tell Panther that what he saw and is indeed correct, and of course he knows Panther's weakness. So what Panther did, it decided to go on a battle with a Shadow Bat, but unfortunately he's no match for it. So what the Shadow Bat did is that he spun Panther around until Panther got dizzy enough and then he collapsed. So, long story short, the Shadow Bat soon leaves the control room and heads towards the sword chamber. Back with Lionel, he had finally arrived inside the Shadowmaster's castle, but better than that, the good news is that he found his father, but encased in ice. But that's not all. He also saw the Shadowmaster was there. So Lionel told the Shadowmaster to let Claudius go so that Lionel can take his place instead. Though the Shadowmaster agrees and said, true, I do want you as a prisoner. Prepare to meet your doom, he said. So, what the Shadow Master did is that, thanks to his cloak of darkness, a shadow beast comes out of nowhere with glowing red eyes and a horn on his head. Now, Lionel has never seen a beast like it before, just till that minute. That's not all. The creature not only has one head, but three. Just before Lionel can go into a battle with the Shadow Beast, he heard his father's voice. Lino, can you hear me, Lino? Claus's voice just told Lionel that he can feel his son's own presence from nearby. That was after, long story short, that Lionel had dodged the Shadow Beast's attack. Before I go any further, I made a slip up. Claudius is encased in a crystal, not ice, so that's my bad. Anyway, back with Claudius, he told his son to break the crystal and hurry up about it because he wanted to help him out. I hear you, Lionel said, and he was about to attempt to break the crystal, but then the creature woke up. So back with the Shadow Beast, after he woke up, he looked over his shoulder to look at Lionel at what he's doing. So he knew he had to stop him, so he again goes on the attack. Story short, after the beast had attacked Lionel after it stopped him from breaking the crystal, that's when the beast uses his power to stun him. What the Shadow Beast did after he crushes the rock with his hand, then the Shadow Master appeared to look at Lionel to plead his case. He said, "You see what the creature did with that rock? That's exactly what he's going to do to you," he said. So the Shadow Master had commanded the Shadow Beast to attack Lionel, and so that's exactly what it did. But as it is about to get closer and closer, Lionel broke one of the rocks, and the flash of light just blinds him. So you know what this means? Thanks to a blast of light, aha, Lionel has an idea. So, as Lionel looked at the flint rocks really carefully and then said to himself that this creature hates light. So, he picked up the flint rocks and he thought if he can clap them together, there's a blast of light that blinds the creature. So that's exactly. Long story short, back with Snarf, who's still in the sword chamber of the cat's lair, he was pacing back and forth and he was worried, and he couldn't help but say to himself, "Is Lionel coming back?" And now he's left to wonder, where did Panthro go? And before you know it, he's face to face with a shadow bat. Now Snarf is in shock because he has never seen a creature like it before, but it's the first time he's seen it. So he says, "Go away!" But the shadow bat just ignores him. Long story short, as Snarf tries desperately to get the Shadow Bat away from Lionel's sword, but he failed miserably, so the Shadow Bat takes the sword anyway. But Snarf knew that there was no time to lose, so what he did as the Shadow Bat was flying away with Lionel's sword, what Snarf did is that he grabs the handle of the sword, and so both of them have left the lair as they were flying in the air. Meanwhile, back with Lionel at the Shadow Realm in Shadowmaster's castle, he was still battling the Shadow Beast, and with a couple of flint rocks. So after Lionel had finished his fight with the Shadow Beast thanks to those flint rocks, so he says that his Shadow Beast is defeated and he should let Claudius go, but before he could finish his sentence, Lionel realizes that there's a problem. His Thundercat insignia has been erased. That's because he had no idea that his Sword of Omens had just left the book. Then the Shadowmaster just let slip to Lionel and told him the bad news. He said that the reason why he's weak just now is because Lionel was unaware that his sword has been unbonded with the Book of Omens. That explains why. Then the Shadowmaster just told him some worse news, that for sure Lionel's going to be finished, and then told the Shadow Beast to finish him, so it's round 2 of the fight between Lionel and the Shadow Beast. Long story short, back with Snarf, who's still holding on to the handle of the Sword of Omens, which was grabbed by the Shadow Bat, and as you may have guessed it, they both left the lair, and they're still flying in the air. Now, back at the Black Pyramid's tomb chamber, Mumm-ra had watched it all happen in the cauldron. As Mumm-ra saw it happen, he at first was pleased to see that the Shadowmaster for once didn't mess up in his mission. But then he started to have a thought that if the Shadowmaster defeats Lionel, then this can mean a serious problem. So Mumm-ra told his canine pal that the first problem on the list is for having the spirits of evil to ask Mumm-ra to open the portal so that the Shadowmaster can be set free once the Shadowmaster has finished his mission. Problem number two. Once that's done, that means the spirits of evil will turn against Mumm-ra, and that Mumm-ra will replace him with a Shellmaster. And problem number three, the worst scenario of all, according to Mumm-ra, he said that he and his canine pal will be outcasts unless something is done quick. So, this is a serious scenario for Mumm-ra. What Mumm-ra did next is that he told his canine pal that as much as he hated to make the spirits of evil upset, but they must have a plan of their own to stop it from happening. So he told Mama, now listen, pay attention. Here's what you do. So even though the plan was never explained, that's when Mama heard the voices of the ancient spirits calling his name. So after that, Mumm-ra said, just a moment, my ancient ones, and then turned to his canine pal and says, go now, make us both proud. And so Mahmud heads off. Back with the ancient spirits, they told Mumm-ra to look in the cauldron, and he did. Then they told him, as you can see, Lionel is battling the Shadowmaster in the Shadow Realm at his castle. So when Mumm-ra heard that, he says, well, this is good news, he said. With Muhammad, who's Mumm-ra's psychic, what he did is that he changed himself into a bat, so he's now on his mission. Back with Lionel, who's still at the Shadowmaster's castle at the Shadow Realm, things didn't look so good for him. Now remember, Lionel was still battling the shadow creature. He tried to clap the flint rocks together again, but no such luck. So what the Shadowmaster told him that he's growing weaker and weaker by the minute. So after the Shadowmaster pleaded his case with Lionel that the end for him would be coming soon, but then he heard a voice of Claudius shouting, no! Claudius told Lionel to hang in there, but Lionel told his father Claudius to say that he couldn't hang on for very long because he's still very weak. And there's a bigger problem because according to Lionel, he told Claudius, his own father, that Snarf is his only hope. Oh, and speaking of Snarf, he's still holding onto the handle of the Sword of Omens, which was stolen earlier, thanks to the Shadow Bat, who had just earlier left the lair, and they're still flying. But wait! Snarf saw something else that was flying up in the sky. Remember Mahmud, who's Mumm-ra's psychic, who just left the pyramid moments ago? Well, he's now a bat, and he's flying in the air, and guess what it did? It went behind the shadow bat that was still flying in the air, and what it did next is unbelievable. He clawed the shadow bat's back, and that causes Snarf and his sword to be let go from it. But luckily for Mama, just when things are looking bad for Snarf and Lionel's sword, luckily for the Mama bat, it grabbed Snarf, and good thing he did. The Mama bat, now that the Shadow Bat had disappeared thanks to him, so what it did is that it's carrying Snarf back to Cat's lair. But Snarf still has Lionel's sword, that's also the good news. So after the Mama bat dropped off Snarf, so Snarf says, thanks for the lift. But he now realizes he must put the sword back in the book, and that's the only way to save Lionel. So he says, hang on, Lionel, I'm coming. And so Snarf rushes off to the sword chamber. So meanwhile there, not only did Snarf make it in time and not a moment too soon, and also the good news, he put the sword back over the book. And good news, it worked. Back with Lionel, now that he found out that Snarf put the sword back where it belonged, he not only got his insignia back, but even better, he even got his strength back. Long story short, back with Lionel, he finished his battle with the Shadow Beast thanks to the flint rocks that he used, and clapping them together to have a burst of light. The Shadowmaster couldn't believe it that the Shadow Beast has been defeated thanks to Lionel. He screams, no! And so Lionel got in front of the Shadowmaster to block his father still encased in the crystals. So the Shadowmaster told Lionel, I'm not finished with you yet. Back with the Shellmaster, he uses his powers on Lionel. And just when things are looking bad, that's when Lionel heard the voice of his father saying, Lionel, can you hear me? Then Claude says, listen to me. Call the Sword of Omens to you, and it will save you. And hurry! And so that's what Lionel did. Meanwhile, back in the sword chamber, what the sword did was unbelievable. It started to levitate and then went right inside the Book of Omens. Now, Snarf has never seen anything like it before, but it was the first time he saw it. Remember Panther that was unconscious back in the control room? He went to the sword chamber to see what's going on. So, not only is Snurfus happy to see Panthro, but he asked a question. What happened? Where have you been? Sorry I'm late, Panthro said, but the Shadow Bat got the best of me back in the control room. What's going on? Panthro asked. I'm not sure yet, Snarf said. Snarf told Panthro, I know this sounds crazy, but I think Lionel was calling for his sword a moment ago. And wouldn't you know it, Snarf was soon proven right because back with the sword, it was transferred to the Shadow Realm where Lionel is, and there it is now, right in Lionel's hand. And when the Shadowmaster saw it, he just couldn't believe it. So speaking of the Shadowmaster back with him in his castle, he was in surprise and in shock. He says, Oh no, not that sword again. So you know what this means. Lionel did what any good guy would do. Project a Thundercat signal from his sword, and so he did. And when he did that, remember Claudius? He's no longer imprisoned in a crystal. He was set free thanks to Lionel. Panicked, back with the Shadowmaster, he now realizes that he's in serious trouble. He says, Claudius, you're free? But that's impossible. So just like what Claudius and Jaga did all these years ago, it's now Claudius and Lionel's turn to hold the sword together. The Shellmaster screams, No! Because he knew he had been defeated by both Claudius and Lionel together. So he says, Not again! So you know what this means, just like what Jaga and Claudius did? The Shellmaster is once again in exile. But there's a problem. The Shellmaster's castle is falling apart. So Lionel told his father, We gotta get out of here. And so they ran out of the castle. Back with Lionel, he told his father, Hang on. And so, with the use of his sword, both father and son had made it out. And good news, they made their escape. Also, the good news is that the Shellmaster's castle has collapsed. Back with Claudius and Lionel now that they made their escape from the Shadowmaster's castle, that's when Claudius told him the bad news that this is where he's going to be leaving him. What are you talking about? Lionel asked. So, Claudius, in omission by confession, just told his son that his time on Thunder has since passed when it exploded, just like it did 3 seasons ago. So, as Claudius went floating away, so in horror, Lionel says, Wait! Claudius, come back! I can't, Claudius says. This is where I'm supposed to be. Goodbye, Lionel, Claudius says. You have made your old man very proud. Back at the Cat's sword chamber, both Panther and Snarf saw something unbelievable. The Book of Omens starting to glow. And what it did next, it had ejected both Lionel and his sword out. Now, good news, they both survived intact. So Panther and Snarf are not only glad to see that Lionel is back, also surviving intact. So Snarf says, I'm so glad to see you. I'm glad to see you too, Lionel said. Where's Claudius? Panther said. Did you save him? Well, Lionel not only said that he did, but he also confessed to Panther. Well, let's just say he's with an old friend. And you know something? Lionel's not kidding. Because instead of one spiritual advisor, Lionel now has two. Jaga the Wise, his mentor, and Claudius, his own father, now at last spiritually united. Back at the Black Pyramid, remember Mumm-ra, who's Mumm-ra's psychic? He not only comes back in the Tomb Chamber, well, his companion's not only glad to see him, but they both looked in the cauldron. And when they did, so Mumm-ra says, Well, 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 it looks like the Shadowmaster failed in his mission. So Mumm-ra decided to deliver the news to his agent Spirits of Evil. He says, Well, it seems to me I have bad news, but some good news. He said that the Shadowmaster had failed thanks to Lionel who defeated him. But there's some good news. According to Mumm-ra, he told his agent Spirits of Evil that the lunar eclipse has now been passed. So what Mumm-ra wanted to know from his ancient spirits by asking a question, should I rescue him, even in exile? So they told him, no, absolutely not. In my opinion, as a matter of fact, there is no reward for failure, they told him. I agree, Mumm-ra said. So you know what this means. Mumm-ra gets to keep his job after all. Next morning, back at the Kessler's sword chamber, it is confirmed although Snarf had explained to Lina while he's away, and so did Panthro, that just earlier a creature just came out of nowhere and saved his life when he did. Because had it not been for that, Snarf would never have delivered the Sword of Omens in time to rescue Lino, which of course he did. So, Panthro, meanwhile, after he confirmed it with Snarf, he asked the question, where did that large bat come from anyway? And then he spotted dog hair in Snarf's fur, then looked at it. So Snarf asked the question, who wants to believe a flying dog anyhow? And that's when both Lion and Panthro had made their final confirmation of where the dog hair comes from. They said, it's Marmot, Mumm-ra's sidekick. But then they dismissed it and said, nah, it couldn't be. But on the contrary, it was him. Because as Snarf said, had it not been for Mahmud who saved him when he did, then Snarf would never have rescued the Lino. And luckily he did, thanks to Mahmud. So it was he who deserved most of the credit in this case. So that ends episode 15.